Welcome to Fighting Stats, the ultimate channel for UFC fans who love statistics and betting breakdowns. I'm your host, Art C, and today I'll be getting you ready for the upcoming UFC fights. Here at Fighting Stats, we have exclusive UFC stats, not available anywhere else, giving us a huge edge over the sportsbooks that help us make money long term. Here at Fighting Stats, we also track how often they throw that left jab or that right hook from southpaw, how often they're moving back, or how much time is spent in side control versus full mount. We have all of that information, but that's not it. We pair that with our tape study here. We're going to go through the fights. We're going to watch for fighters' strengths, weaknesses, tendencies, and overall strategies to help you get prepared for the upcoming UFC fights. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Welcome to Fighting Stats. Alexandre Pantoja taking on Joshua Van at UFC 323. Again, we'll be there live in person. I'm kind of excited for this fight because, man, I've been a fan of Josh Van for a while. Looks very impressive. Again, we went through all of the tape. We got a pretty good idea of what he wants to do. And it's just whether or not he can pull the trigger and do what he wants to do here. So Josh Van going to be, I'm going to categorize him as a striker slash boxer. Pantoja going to be a BJJ guy, right? The fight's going to start out orthodox versus orthodox. Josh Van almost exclusively fights from orthodox. Pantoja, I believe, only fights from orthodox as well. Now we did see early on in Joshua Van's career, and the weakness that we saw for Joshua Van, and I'll just get it out of the way, is those outside low kicks, right? And I look back and I think about he fought Brandon Royval, who went to the low kicks pretty early there, right? Who else went to the low kicks? Oh, Edgar Shirez went to the low kicks pretty early. Was doing some damage with those outside low kicks. Go back and watch that in round number 1. Josh Van continuing to eat them, but he didn't have to switch stances. I just don't know if he can switch stances. And he dealt with those leg kicks pretty well. But clear path here in terms of a weakness that I saw for Van is just the ability to check the low kicks. And, he seems to power through it pretty well there. The other only negative thing that I see with Joshua Van is that he can start pretty slow. He's a slow starter. He wants to sort of read his opponent, gets the feel for his opponents, things like that, right? So we started with Boons. He lost round 1 to Booniz. He lost round 1 to Johnson. He lost round 1 to Shirez. He lost round 1 to Durden. Actually, I think he won round 1 to Durden. Won round 1 against Ray Sasura because those guys tried to grapple. And then Bruno Silva won round 1. So he's adjusted maybe. Come back, and I think he might have lost round 1 to Royval there as well. So again, it is a concern just being a slow starter. You don't want to really do that, but he is fighting a 5-round fight here against Alexandre Pantoja. So now let's get to the good things with Josh Van. Man, he is impressive with his boxing. He works the body, he works the head, has a very nice jab. Now, in almost 90% of his fights for Josh Van, he tends to be the shorter guy with a shorter reach, but he finds a way to land these counters. He baits the jab, he baits the counters out with his jab, a nice long jab, and then when you try to counter, he comes in. He's sort of like just out of the way with his head movement and his footwork, and he has some pretty good counters there. If you go back and watch that Royval fight, Royval throwing over 400 significant strikes. And almost 50% of the strikes that Josh Van landed were considered counter strikes. And that's what does the damage for him, is just those landing the right hands, the left hooks. He works the body a lot. He likes that left hook to the liver, and he works it pretty well there. Josh Van does work in his own leg kicks, but against grapplers, he doesn't throw it too often. So I can see that, round 1, again, it's going to be orthodox versus orthodox. Josh Van has to pressure, I think. He has to be on the front foot. He cannot let Pantoja get off to a front head start, because Pantoja honestly comes out sometimes. He blitzes forward. He just comes out reckless, right? You think back and you look at the Pantoja fight against Alex Perez. Just absolutely blitzed and came forward and, blitzed nonstop, ended up getting the back and the rear naked choke. And Pantoja is pretty live in round 1. Like he runs for the grappling, tries to get you down to the ground and tries to get you to the body lock, right? So that's going to be probably the game plan for Pantoja here, is to try to get the fight down to the ground, and whether or not he can do that is the question here. So let's take a look with Pantoja. In terms of the takedown offense, right? He landed 3 takedowns against Kai Kara-France. Kai Kara-France keeping the fight standing for some of that. He did struggle there against Usyk a little bit for the takedowns. Ended up getting 9 takedowns on 19 attempts. Usyk working back up to his feet. Royval gave up a lot of control time there as well. And Moreno obviously made him work there. But if you go back to his 2 losses, the last 2 losses against Askar Askarov and Davison Figueiredo, they laid out the game plan. Those were 3-round fights. Alexandre Pantoja couldn't get the takedowns there, only landing 1 takedown on Askarov, only landing 2 takedowns on 10 attempts against Davison Figueiredo. So if he can't get the takedowns, he is sort of forced to strike, and that's where Josh Van really excels here, right? And the takedown defense of Josh Van has been pretty much elite in terms of what we saw, right? Gave up 1 takedown against Bruno Silva. That's fine. He gave up 4 takedowns on 21 attempts against Ray Sarua. Now, Ray Sarua is not much of a striker, so really defended those takedowns. But the single leg defense, the getting back up to the cage, his balance overall, really good takedown defense for Josh Van. And then when he actually does get taken down, I think he got taken down 2 times there against Durden. He pummels for the underhooks on the ground. He levitates, or he elevates and uses the space to get back up, right? So I can see positions where even if Pantoja does get the fight down to the ground, as soon as he tries to posture up for some ground and pound, I think that Josh Van can elevate, get that fight back up to the feet. Yeah, I think Pantoja is going to struggle with some takedowns here. Wouldn't surprise me if he lands a couple of them, but I think that Josh Van will either survive the ground or get back up to the feet and then reset it. And then, the takedowns for Pantoja come pretty early in his fights, right? He gets the fight down to the ground, and then what I find is that later on into the fight, right? So the takedowns can become a little bit harder to get, right? So he kind of slows down just a little bit, and with Josh Van, it's sort of like a tale of two tapes here. With Josh Van, he tends to be a slow starter and he picks up as the rounds go on. Cardio seems to be on point, whereas Alexandre Pantoja, he starts fast and he sort of tails off in the end, right? Rounds 2, 3, 4, he sort of takes off, doesn't throw a lot of volume, doesn't really proactively grapple too much because he's trying to conserve his energies in those middle rounds. So it's going to come down to those middle rounds. So I do think that Pantoja early could get a takedown or two, could win a round because of top control. I wouldn't be surprised if Pantoja does get the back at some point. He just finds a way of getting to the back. We haven't really seen Josh Van fight out of a body lock, but his initial takedown defense is good. His initial get-ups are good. His initial, doing all the right things in terms of the grappling, defensive grappling to keep the fight on the feet. That being said, again, if Pantoja does get the body lock at any point, it might be the round, it might not be the round, and Josh Van just has to avoid getting choked out. And then into the later rounds again, I think as hard as the takedowns and the control is for Pantoja in round 1, it's just going to get that much harder into rounds 2, 3, 4, and even 5 for Pantoja. So I see this being a decent live bet spot. Honestly, I think that Pantoja will have some early success, and then to the later rounds, it's going to be Josh Van picking it up. If Pantoja does not have the 5 rounds to go with Josh Van, I can see this being very dicey here into the later rounds. Now, Pantoja is getting older. I think he's 35, 36 now, and Josh Van is still in his young 20s. I think that Josh Van has, 13, 12 years experience, or not experience, but like age gap here. So the recovery, the cardio, all that stuff favors Josh Van. And man, I like his striking, man, and he lands some decent counters. I could see a world now. This is going to be crazy because, Alexandre Pantoja has never been finished. I don't even know if he's been knocked down. Let me check. Alexandre Pantoja has been knocked down once, and that was against Figueiredo. We did tape that one there. So if you go back and watch that, he clips him there at the end of the round, follows up with ground and pound, and it's sort of saved by the bell. And if Josh Van gets that same position, I think that he could sort of finish. I don't know if he's going to knock him out cold, but a referee TKO wouldn't surprise me, especially with the amount of volume that Josh Van throws. He broke the record for bantamweight or flyweight in terms of consecutive fights over 100 significant strikes landed, and he's only fought 3-round fights, right? He landed 204 significant strikes against Brendan Royval, 165 strikes against Cody Durden. He puts up a ton of volume against these guys, right? And so Pantoja hasn't really fought a volume good striker. He fought obviously Moreno that landed a bunch, but he doesn't have the power. Ursig also has some good hands, but doesn't have the power there. I think Josh Van has a mix of power, the body work, the takedown defense, and the cardio to make this fight very close. And wouldn't surprise me if Josh Van wins and we see Anu. Wouldn't surprise me if Josh Van loses, but then fights again for the title later on. I think that Josh Van's going to be in the title picture for a long, long while there. So I think that Josh Van does have a lot of paths to victory here, whereas Pantoja needs to get the grappling going, needs to get the body lock at some point to secure a round and to win a very close decision. I think if Pantoja does finish Van, it's probably a rear naked choke or some kind of weird choke and front choke, but other than that, I think on the feet, it's going to be all Josh Van. If Josh Van finishes, it's probably going to be a KO, and it's probably going to be late. I don't see Josh Van ever subbing Pantoja. So I see this, there's a lot of ways for this to go to decision, not a lot of ways for this fight to end by finish here. So let's get into the actual numbers here. I'm going to break it down. We're going to see where the actual line should be, and we'll get it there so that we'll know when the props come out how to attack them here. So we're going to put Pantoja here on the blue side. We're going to put Josh Van here on the red side. Now, this is what I normally do. I pull up our trackers here. I try to predict sort of where, or I try to give my equity in terms of where I think each finishing equity is, and then it helps me determine where the money line is, and obviously where the props are. So let's start here with Alexandre Pantoja to win by KO. Now, I see Pantoja winning by KO, potentially if he throws like a knee up the middle. Josh Van does dip his head a little bit. Pantoja does throw some knees up the middle. I could see maybe like a positional ground and pound TKO, but Josh Van seems to have a chin. Pantoja a little bit wild with his strikes, so it wouldn't surprise me if he catches Van, but I just don't know if he has the power to put him out, especially later. If it comes early, it might be like KO1, maybe KO2. I just don't rate it that high. So for now, let's put 10%. I think even that's kind of high, but we'll leave it at 10% to be respectful here. Pantoja to win by submission. Now, I don't know how much grappling success he has. Like Pantoja is elite on the ground, so you have to be respectful for the submission equity here. So let's start with 25%. I think that's fair. It could be down to 20. I might have to adjust it, but we'll leave it at 25. When he gets that back take, he's really good at that body lock triangle, and again, working for the rear naked choke. So it wouldn't surprise me if he finds that choke there finish, or he lays on top and gets some wins by decision here. So wins by decision, I'm going to put at 20%, I think, to start. Again, it would be the decision win would have to come from multiple takedowns, 8 minutes or so of control, and then Van not finishing him, not doing enough damage in those later rounds to steal those rounds back, sort of thing. So I think that's okay. Let's move over to the Van KO side now. I think that Van KO has some equity here. If Pantoja is 10%, I think that Van has some more equity, maybe at 20%. Because I think that his hands are good in a 5-round fight. I favor Van, especially into the later rounds there. So I'm giving it 20% here. Van to win by submission, I don't think is very live. I don't think he engages in grappling. Early in his career, he went for takedowns a lot more. Since the Durden fight, he hasn't attempted any takedowns. He has fought some grapplers and such. I get it, but if he was supposed to attempt a takedown at all, it would have been against Royval and against, to get the fight down to the ground where he should have the advantage. But he even looked for a takedown against Royval. So why would he look for a takedown here against Pantoja, who's sort of elite on the ground? His path to victory stays on the feet here, so 0% to win by submission. Now, Josh Van to win by decision, I think is honestly kind of live. I think that he can take over into the later rounds there as well. I want to say like 20% to 25%. Yeah, I think that's okay. Josh Van, probably 20%, 25%. He comes from keeping the fight on the feet, doing more damage in the exchanges. Even when Pantoja might be grabbing a single leg or something, Josh Van likes the Travis Brown elbows. He likes the hammer fist. So if we're scoring it strictly based on damage and not control, Van has a lot of decision upside because I don't think Pantoja is going to do a ton of damage. Even if he gets the fight down to the ground with the ground and pound, as soon as he postures up with the ground and pound, Van's going to elevate. He's going to, get some space, going to get back up to the feet. So I see that Van does all the damage here. It's just whether or not Pantoja finds that submission there. So adding them all up, 10% for Pantoja KO, 25% for sub, and 20% for decision, gets to an overall money line of 55% here. I'm going to zoom in here just so you can see a little bit better. 55% for Pantoja on the money line, 35% wins inside the distance. Now on the Josh Van side, it was 20% wins by KO, 25% to win by decision for a total money line of 45%, or plus 122, wins inside the distance 20%, or plus 400 or better. So the prediction, I guess, is Pantoja and Pantoja to win by submission. But I think that Josh Van is very live here, and I think the odds should be a lot closer. And I think that if you wait, you might be able to get Josh Van on a good live bet spot, and then goes to decision. I'll go to decision, kind of pick them here. I think that the line's going to be favored to going to decision, so they might have to give more equity to decision. Maybe you could do something like Pantoja decision is 25% and Pantoja sub is 20%. Kind of think that Van has a little bit more decision equity, but I think that's fine here. And then it goes to decision 50-50 there. So that looks about right. I'm fine with those numbers there. So again, I think it's pretty close. I think 55-45 in that range. I don't see Pantoja being a huge favorite just because of the skill set of Josh Van, but I've been a huge Josh Van fan since the beginning. I think that he's live. I think that he has lots of paths to victory. So time will tell. We'll get there on Saturday and we'll watch that there. I think that we do pretty well with these deep in-depth tape studies, and especially when we're there live, because we want to make some money, especially in Vegas. So join us, follow us. I'll be posting that event when we do get there. I'm actually going to be live streaming there when we're there. We're going to try to find some live betting angles. We're going to see if we can get some live betting wins there. So join us for free. You can join us at patreon.com/FightingStats. We actually can join us for free today, but we do post all of our plays there. In 2025, we're up over 350 units betting on UFC, and you can tell from just the tape study here, we have one of the most detailed breakdowns that you will find here. This is just one fight. Imagine doing a full card there. So we're putting in the effort here, and it's showing off with the results. We're up astronomical units, up $150,000 just from betting on UFC at $500 units. So we continue to get that on. Again, this is the last pay-per-view for 2025. We're trying to go out with a bang, trying to clear some ridiculous number here. So if we can get there, hopefully we can get there. So follow along for the journey, seeing if we can clear 400 maybe by the end of the year. So as always, my name is Art C, and this is Fighting Stats. Thanks for watching. Well, that is it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this type of content, make sure you smash that like button. Hit the subscribe. You get notified anytime we put out new content. Remember, for 2025, Fighting Stats is on an absolute record-breaking heater. We're up over 350 units. That's $150,000 just from betting on UFC. Now, if you take a look at this profit chart here, it wasn't one or two big parlays that got us there. It was consistent wins week over week, month over month. We put in our time. We put in the tape study. We looked at all the fighting stats, and we got there. The record speaks for itself. Now, our exclusive Patreon members get access to our live betting watch party, where we watch and live bet on UFC together. That's an additional 100 units that we made live betting on UFC today. I tell you what to bet, and I tell you when to bet it, so you can join us today. Again, all of that's available at patreon.com/FightingStats. Good luck.